House Energy Committee will come to order. We're not going to start until more of our members get here. Our apologies. We had some protests that disrupted our proceedings on the House floor, and we are back here a little later than we expected. First up today is going to be Christopher Davis with CTIA, but again, we're going to wait until more members are able to join us. And I believe there's one other person from Canada who has a flight to catch. Somebody want to remind me who that is? Frank Clegg. So we'll have Mr. Davis up first for about 10 minutes, followed by Frank Clegg. We can go no later than 5 o'clock. We'll get as many people in as we can. We have a very thick set of cards of people who want to testify. Perhaps after these first two, we'll put as I count it right now, the proponents have had 1 hour and 15 minutes, and the opponents have had 1 hour from the proceedings this morning. Mr. Davis is going to go first. We'll try to keep it even. We'll go back and forth, positive, negative, and perhaps put a 2-minute limit on testimony. That means not everybody's going to get to say as much as they want to say, but it means more people will get an opportunity to testify. And as I indicated this morning, we will have at least one more hearing sometime in September or later with at least 30 days notice so that there's adequate time for everybody to prepare any further testimony they want to present. House Energy Committee will recess at the call of the chair. Gentleman from Canada, please tell me your name again. Is it Clegg? And have you put a card in to testify? Thank you, sir. Energy Committee will come to order. Mr. Davis, if you would come forward, press the red button. We look forward to hearing you from your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and representatives. Good afternoon. I'm Christopher Davis. I'm Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Maryland, and I've been involved with research on RF and its possible effects on humans for over 40 years. And I'd like to really begin this afternoon by trying to clear up some of the inaccuracies and inconsistencies that I heard in the testimony I was listening to this morning. And a lot of it pertains to what are the safety standards for exposure to radio frequency. Over many years, expert scientific bodies have studied all the literature and evaluated it in deciding what a safety standard should be. This was actually not done by the Federal Communications Commission. It was done by the IEEE and then in conjunction with ANSI and also National Council on Radiation Protection. And these were very large bodies of experienced scientists, physicists, engineers, biologists, MDs, who looked at all the literature. And these standard-setting bodies continue to look at all the literature and evaluate it comprehensively to decide what is a safe level for public exposure. And the safety standards that they promulgated were adopted by the FCC. So when you talk about the FCC standard, yes, that's the legislative legal standard that the wireless communication industry has to subscribe to. But in reality, it's based on scientific evidence, scientific study. And we all know that there are tremendous varieties of studies out there, and the community that comes up with safety standards evaluates all these studies. So, for example, the head of the FDA, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, recently sent out a press release talking about the recent NTP study, which was mentioned this morning, and pointed out that this was well within the purview and consideration, and they have decided it doesn't require any modification of safety standards because the exposure levels used in the NTP study were very, very high compared to what one would experience, certainly from these small cell installations. Now, I don't know whether you've had time to read it, but you have in front of you my actual written testimony, and part of that written testimony is calculations I have made of what the maximum exposure a person might get who is in very close proximity to a small cell installation. And as you might see if you look at this chart, that even at the highest levels of 4 radios on a 30-foot tower with an effective radiated power of 120 watts, the maximum exposure that a human could get is still hundreds of times smaller than the safety standard that the FCC uses based on the scientific evaluation of these many expert committees. And indeed, expert committees worldwide, including Canada, New Zealand, the European Community, and so on, they've re-examined these safety standards and all concur that the current safety standard is a very great protector of human health, because the maximum exposure levels that these standards permit are still a factor of 50 times below the only effects that have ever been observed in animals, and these were behavioral effects. Even at those high levels, there's no real evidence that permanent harm occurred, but there's a 50 factor of safety in these safety standards. And I certainly, after my many years of experience working in this field, feel very confident that these safety standards are extremely protective of human health, and I think the technology that's based on what we've been talking about today has great value to society. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and representatives.
Thank you for your testimony. Members of the committee, do we have any questions for this witness? Apparently not. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And you'll be able to get to the airport on time. Mr. Clegg, if you would come up, and we'll get you out of here as well. Mr. Clegg, I think you were billed as a former CEO of Microsoft Canada. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you're currently with, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, I retired several years ago from Microsoft, and over the last decade of my life, I've gotten involved with becoming an advocate for the better and safer use of technology. 5 years ago, I co-founded an organization called Canadians for Safe Technology, and our focus is really on 2 things. One is raising awareness in the marketplace about the potential harm from radioactive devices or radiation-emitting devices if not used properly. And the second is really working at all levels of government in Canada to change legislation to catch up with the technology. So, Chairman Glenn and the members of the Energy Policy Committee, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this afternoon. As mentioned before, I have worked my entire career in the technology sector. And as a former president of Microsoft Canada, I've witnessed the incredible benefits that technology can provide. I've also seen the potential risks if technology is not used appropriately. I believe there is potential harm in our current implementation of wireless devices today. After I resigned or retired from Microsoft, I did what a lot of executives do. I got on several boards. I have actually resigned from all the corporate boards on which I was previously served, and I am dedicate my focus to C4ST and the Environmental Health Trust. Our current North American guidelines are stuck in the early 1900s theory that non-ionizing radiation cannot cause harm, or if it does, it might heat tissue. Albert Einstein is one of the scientists credited with that statement. He died the same year that Steve Jobs was born. To think that the science has not evolved since then is unacceptable and ignores the thousands of peer-reviewed published evidence that show harm from wireless devices at levels below our current North American standards. In North America, we are sadly behind a lot of other leading countries on this topic. China, Russia, Italy, and Switzerland have guidelines that are 100 times safer than our guidelines in North America. Now, I understand that you received a lot of good science-based evidence this morning about the harm from wireless radiation. I want to talk briefly about the business issues surrounding the deployment of 5G technology. The National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy in Washington, D.C. published a report entitled Reinventing Wires, The Future of Landlines and Networks, written by Timothy Sheckley. Dr. Sheckley holds a master's in telecommunications and a PhD in communications policy from the University of Colorado. Mr. Chair, I gave you one copy. I was not able to bring several copies for all the members, although I did give each of you, I believe you got a copy of my remarks. Dr. Sheckley's report challenges the current thinking that wireless solutions are the most optimum method to deliver high-speed communications. There is no doubt that for specific, limited mobile solution, a wireless connection is necessary. But in the majority of situations requiring internet connections, wired solutions are far superior. My industry has been very effective in convincing individuals and legislators that wireless connections are necessary for internet access. I've chosen 7 conclusions from Dr. Sheckley's report. First, as the technology evolves, wired solutions continue to be 100 times faster than wireless. Wireless technologies are unreliable, they're more vulnerable to security and privacy problems, and prone to latency and delays issues versus wired systems. The cost of internet access can be significantly reduced with fiber networks. Wireless networks consume significant amounts of energy that I believe is not sustainable. The average iPhone, for example, uses more energy than a mid-sized Energy Star compliant refrigerator. In the 3 years between 2012 and 2015, the wireless cloud increased its carbon footprint by the equivalent of 4.9 million cars on the road. His fifth conclusion, universal dependence on wireless systems leaves people vulnerable in the event of a power failure grid. In the event of a prolonged power outage, mobile devices leave people with no service compared to landlines with independent power sources. New USB, premises wiring, and cabling technologies for inside homes and buildings provide a secure and reliable alternative to Wi-Fi and other wireless platforms. And finally, there are a significant number of unanswered questions about the implementation of the Internet of Things. Unfortunately, based on my industry's track records, solutions will be implemented in the market without thorough answers. Without government direction and potential intervention, the passage of bills like SB 637 and SB 894 will allow the deployment of this technology unchecked. For example, what protection will citizens have from the additional troves of data that will be collected from the most intimate details of our lives, details that can be sold and are captured by botnets? When critical systems are linked to tens or even hundreds of thousands of more remote actuators and or cloud-based software, those links become vulnerable, inadequate, or inappropriate. What additional protective measures are being taken? The Internet of Things also raises many safety issues. One simple example is what if a stove or oven is activated by a cell phone when something flammable is nearby? What if a hacker in China or Iran or another country finds a way to control door locks, furnaces, or even the national grid system? My industry has not demonstrated the responsibility to worry about these kinds of issues before we have launched them in the marketplace. In addition to Dr. Sheckley's report, other concerns have been raised. In September 2017, over 200 scientists and doctors from 34 countries sent a declaration to officials in the European Commission demanding a moratorium on the increase of cell phone antennas for planned 5G implementation. 5G technology has many differences between current wireless technologies.
Mr. Clegg, pardon the interruption for
Yes, sir.
members who've just joined us. This is Frank Clegg, former CEO of Microsoft Canada. Please proceed, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. 5G radiation is absorbed chiefly by the skin. Now, a normal reaction to that would be, well, it's on the skin, it's outside the body, so it really can't do me much harm. Fortunately, as I'll remind you that the skin is the largest organ in the body. A recent study that's in your package from Dagna Takover this morning, one that talks from Hebrew University, where they've seen that the whole human body is starting to act like an antenna in a 5G environment. The other study is from the Army and Navy. It was a joint study that found 50 out of 300 studies they evaluated demonstrated that biological effects on the human body. And we know that once you have biological effects, they can be good or they can be negative effects. And we just simply do not know with this technology. Patients have seen benefits from short-term exposures and therapeutic treatments for neurological conditions in this millimeter technology use. What we don't know is what are the health effects will be when people are exposed 24/7 from outside sources, microcells on utility poles, as well as inside sources from household appliances. In many cases, the only difference between a medicine and a poison is the dosage. The U.S., Russian, and Chinese defense agencies have been developing weapons that rely on the capabilities of this electronic frequency range to induce unpleasant burning sensations in the skin as a form of crowd control. Again, at what levels does this frequency move from a beneficial application to a harmful one? Intensive infrastructure will be required due to the limitations of 5G technology. 5G requires unobstructed paths between transmitters and receivers. Thus, many antennae are necessary, preferably with a line of sight. As a result, some forecasts show a full implementation could result in powerful antenna every 3 to 10 houses in residential areas. My industry's reaction to any form of legislation from any level of government is predictable. We will yell loud and long about the potential impact. I don't believe there will be revenue or funding impacts. I don't believe there will be a loss in productivity nor competitive advantage. What will happen is what I've seen for over 35 years. There will be initial grumbling. Then we will get to work and not only find a better solution, but a cheaper solution. There are far too many benefits personally, socially, and for business for anything else to happen. I believe that my industry has lost the trust that it has been given the last few decades, where new technology can be launched in the market with very few checks and balances. Almost on a daily basis, there are reports of some breach of trust from my industry. Fortunately, not many impact the millions of customers like the recent Facebook issue, or Yahoo's 2014 breach impacting over 500 million customers that wasn't reported until 2016. Unfortunately, I doubt the $35 million fine given to Yahoo's holding company will have an impact on the behavior of companies with billions of dollars on their balance sheet. I have no doubt that this laissez-faire approach has resulted in significant growth in technology in the industry with significant benefits to customers and businesses. I submit we have no idea at what cost. Given the significant acceptance of wireless technology, where in some countries predictions are for more than one cell phone on average per person, the impacts will only increase. I'm advocating for a more responsible rollout of technology. An excellent place to start is with the proposed 5G solutions. Until we have a better understanding of the potential harm to individuals, until we can prove that there are solutions to increase reliability, energy consumption, security and privacy breaches, and until we get a clear perspective on the real potential benefits, we should not give my industry carte blanche to proceed full speed ahead. I believe this is an opportunity to challenge my industry to come up with better solutions so we can have the best of both worlds. The continuing implementation of solutions that provide continued access to the internet and interconnections, but are done in a safe manner. For that reason, I ask you to vote against Bills SB 637 and 894. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Representative Riley.
Thank you. Yeah, in your testimony, you mentioned that 70, when you're talking about children,
Yes,
that the effect on children, we quote that 70% of the brain of a 5-year-old versus 10% of the adult is affected by these, and you say studies show. Could you elaborate a lot on that? What studies are these?
Well, the first study was done back in the early 1990s by Dr. Henry Lai and his group out of the state of Washington. Sir, I can give you I send you the email of the studies. The second was done most recently by the Environmental Health Trust. What we did is we took models of the cell phones, and we replicated them and measured the penetration of the skull through the skull in through the brain. And so those are done by both my organization, Environmental Health Trust, and again by this group out of the University of Washington.
Okay, so is this like these two studies are clearly show that the radiation from the phones affect children more than adults?
Yes, so what it is that the child's head, skull is thinner, right? As we all know, developing. So until the skull develops to the normal density and thickness of an adult, you can see the models that show the actual penetration level coming through 70% of the child's brain, whereas in the adult it will only go to about 10%.
Are these done with like MRIs or CAT scans, or how do they do that?
To be honest, I don't remember the process, but again, I'd be glad to provide those to the chair.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Clegg, I assumed that what we would hear from the industry, and they haven't given us an answer yet, which I hope they will address, but I assumed that we would be told that it was less expensive to roll out the wireless. Did I understand your testimony to say it would be less expensive to do a wired system? I assumed that would be the opposite, but you did in fact testify it would be cheaper to do that.
Yes, what I'm referring to is Dr. Sheckley's report. And in his report, his core thesis is that it is cheaper when you consider all the factors, and you consider the fact that you don't have to continue to upgrade the technology with each new generation, that it is cheaper to actually implement it in a wired environment than it is in a wireless environment.
Because 5G, 10G, 15 can all go up along the same fiber.
Yes, sir.
That's
Absolutely.
Representative DeAnda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was answered. Thank you.
Representative LaFave.
So when you say that these electromagnetic waves go into 70% of a child's brain, what does that do?
There are two major, well, there's two of the major ones that I focus on. The first one is the development of cancer within the brain. There has been this $25 million NTP study that the actual National Toxicology Program has acknowledged is a significant change in the belief. And so when you have that penetration into the brain, then it does change the DNA level. So we have other studies from individuals at Columbia University that show that this technology actually does change at the DNA level. So what you've got now is inside the child's brain, the technology not only gets further inside the child's brain, but it's actually absorbed because more of the child's brain is water than an adult brain. So you have more of the radiation in the brain, and it stays longer in the brain, and it can have the impacts of DNA, and it does raise the risk of cancer.
So you're arguing that these 5G signals cause radiation.
Yeah, they emit radiation.
They emit a radiation. It goes into 70% of a young child's brain.
Yes, sir.
And that causes cancer.
It can cause cancer. The same as we don't know today in tobacco, why can one person smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day and somebody gets secondhand smoke? We don't know exactly the whole process around cancer, but there are studies that show a connection between wireless radiation emissions and the development of cancer.
So on all that causal chain from the radiation to the cancer, are all of those published studies?
Yes, absolutely.
They're all peer-reviewed?
Yes, sir.
So what confidence level can you say that these things are a significant contributor to cancer?
100%. And let me tell you, I don't make that statement lightly. When I retired, when you retire, you have the decision to do what you want to do. And I spent several months, I was introduced to this issue in my local community with 3 cell tower battles. So I had the time and the resources to be able to go out and meet with people from Yale, Harvard, Columbia, University of Toronto. One was a co-laureate Nobel Prize winning scientist. The other wrote the section for the World Health Organization on cancer that talked about a possible carcinogen. When I went out and did that own research on my own time, my own energy, I was 100% convinced that there is a connection between wireless technology and cancer in humans. Then I decided to get involved in a very aggressive way, starting C4ST. I have had the opportunity to present to several committees in different states. Although I'm trying to keep my effort in Canada, it's very difficult not to accept the invitations from other people in the U.S. So to answer your question, sir, I did not make this commitment lightly. I do not make these statements lightly. I'm putting my credibility on the line, and I am convinced that there is a connection between wireless, radiation from wireless devices, and human cancer. Let me add one more point, if I may. The 2 of the key individuals, the one that I referenced who wrote the cancer section for the World Health Organization, and the other individuals, and his name is Dr. Anthony Miller, happens to live in the Toronto area, so I spent a lot of time with Anthony, or Dr. Miller. Second individual is named Dr. Hardell. When the World Health Organization came out with their designation in 2011 that stated that it is a 2B possible carcinogen, it was Dr. Hardell's group in Sweden that formed the basis of this decision. In the last several months, both Dr. Hardell and Dr. Miller have written a paper defending their theory now that they believe that wireless radiation is a Category 1 carcinogen, which puts it in the league of tobacco.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Looks like there's no further questions for you, sir. We'll get you on your plane.
Thank you. I appreciate your comment. I mean, I feel a little bit like a rock star here, but I thank you.
Just FYI, members on both sides of this committee, earlier today, this was the lead story on the Drudge Report. It is now located 2 or 3 stories down in the middle column of the Drudge Report. Used to be the headline. The next witness we're going to have is Haran Rashish. Pardon me if I did not get that correctly. Rashish, tell me, sir, so we don't...
I answered anything close.
Okay. And you are with Extenet Systems, Inc.?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Look forward to your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, representatives, staff members, and interested parties.
And if you would, sir, about 5 minutes.
My name is Haran Rashish. I'm Director of External Relations for Extenet Systems, Inc., a privately held telecommunications company based in Lisle, Illinois. Extenet has a vital interest in SB 637 because we design, build, own, manage, and operate indoor and outdoor distributed network systems to help meet the growing demand for improved mobile and wireless broadband coverage and capacity in key strategic markets across the United States, including many such markets here in Michigan. Distributed networks bring wireless network elements such as low-powered wireless antennas and access points closer to the users to ensure ubiquitous and high-capacity wireless broadband connectivity. Utilizing distributed antenna systems, remote radio heads, small cells, Wi-Fi, and distributed core software switching technologies, Extenet enables wireless service providers, enterprises, and venues to better serve their subscribers, customers, workers, residents, tenants, and communities. Extenet owns and operates multi-carrier, often referred to neutral host, and multi-technology distributed network systems to ensure multiple wireless service providers can provide wireless telecommunications and eventually 5G services in the most effective and efficient manner. Utilizing our neutral host facilities, we also provide licensed and/or unlicensed spectrum to the general public on a non-discriminatory basis. Extenet creates a scalable network design utilizing its high bandwidth fiber network to ensure that wireless network densification needs of users and wireless service providers are met and can evolve over time as user demands dictate. Typically, we install distributed network systems on existing utility poles, existing streetlights, and other existing poles located in the public right-of-way. Access to these public rights-of-way for such distributed network systems is essential not only to Extenet, but also to the people of Michigan who are clamoring for more and more wireless access and bandwidth, which they can only get from the natural increase in the number of wireless installations like Extenet. In Michigan, Extenet is registered as a competitive access provider, or CAP, on the Michigan Public Service Commission's Intrastate Telecommunications Service Provider Registration Database, and has had a CAP tariff on file with the MPSC since July 26, 2007. We have pole attachment agreements in place in Michigan with DTE Energy, Consumers Energy, AT&T, Frontier, Indiana Michigan Power, Traverse City Light and Power, and Upper Peninsula Power Company. These agreements permit the placement of fiber, antenna, and wireless equipment on utility-owned poles within the public rights-of-way. In addition, we have almost 30 Metro Act permits with Michigan municipalities. With these agreements and permits, Extenet has installed and continues to install networks throughout the state. For many years prior to joining Extenet, I practiced telecommunications law here in Lansing. In that capacity, I saw Michigan take the national lead in helping telecommunications carriers gain access to the public rights-of-way through the introduction and passage of the Metropolitan Extension Telecommunications Rights-of-Way Oversight Act, PA 48 of 2002. The Metro Act, as it is called, helped standardize access to and virtually eliminate disputes over the public rights-of-way. However, despite a 2004 determination by the Michigan Metro Authority that distributed network systems should be granted access to the rights-of-way under the Metro Act, we continue to encounter municipalities that do not allow access or seek non-economically feasible fees for such access. Let me emphasize that the overwhelming majority of municipalities in Michigan cooperate with us and recognize the economic benefits to their residents of improving wireless bandwidth and accessibility. However, there are a few outliers who do not cooperate and do not recognize the legal rights Extenet has under both the Metro Act and federal law to install small wireless systems. SB 637 would, as the Metro Act did, standardize access to and the fees for placing wireless telecommunications facilities within the public rights-of-way. It would ensure federally guaranteed access for small cells and distributed antenna systems in the public rights-of-way are maintained in Michigan. In turn, this would result in timely deployment of next-generation 5G telecommunications and other telecommunications infrastructure vital to Michigan's economic welfare. SB 637 establishes rates for attachment to municipally owned utility poles and structures that would be economically feasible and standardized throughout the state. In addition, SB 637 would encourage timely approval of small cell locations and installations, resulting in rapid deployment based on economics and consumer demand. Extenet supports the passage of SB 637. However, we also recognize that it is not a perfect bill. We urge this committee to work with all parties to reach a consensus to improve SB 637 prior to passage. This morning, one of the witnesses alleged that we operate without insurance. Extenet does maintain policies with major carriers, and almost every municipality and every pole owner that we've ever applied to attach to or in require us to provide certificates of insurance with our applications before they'll approve them. The areas that we ask you to look at for improvement.
How much longer you got there, sir?
2 more pages.
Okay.
The areas we ask you to look at for improvement are the definition of wireless infrastructure provider. The current definition in Section 9C requires us to have written authorization to perform the work on behalf of a wireless service provider if we are building as a wireless infrastructure provider. However, as a certified telecommunications provider, Extenet and other neutral host providers like us have independent rights under federal law to construct small cell networks in the public rights-of-way, whether or not we are performing the works on behalf of a wireless service provider. There are times when we construct networks on our own behalf and on behalf of private businesses who are not wireless service providers. I believe it was Representative Griffin who asked this morning about co-location of carriers on the same poles. As a neutral host provider, we always want more than one carrier per node. That's one of the ways we can make more money, by having more carriers in the same space in the same technology. The language in the bill requiring us to have authorization actually discourages neutral host co-location because it gives the wireless carriers that extra advantage to say to us, no, we don't want anyone else there. So we urge you to consider removal of the written authorization requirements, because such a change will clarify the application of federal law to this bill, avoid future disputes with municipalities, and encourage multiple carriers to co-locate on neutral host built nodes. The two other changes that I ask you to look at are in the dispute resolution section, making a change so instead of sending any disputes to individual circuit courts throughout the state, the disputes are sent to the MPSC as it is done under the Metro Act. That way we will have rulings consistent throughout the state as opposed to having different rulings in one side of the state, another, or another county. We encourage you to pass SB 637 so that the applications and permits throughout the state and the costs throughout the state are the same process to access the public rights-of-way in Williams Township, Mount Pleasant, Scioto Township, Grand Rapids, Escanaba, Ann Arbor, or any other municipality in Michigan. SB 637 encourages private investment in much-needed telecommunications infrastructure development that will benefit the people of Michigan.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Haran. Representative Lefebvre, you have a question? Okay, thank you. Next up, we're going to have Janine Deal of the Michigan Safe Technology. Now, I'm going to impose from this point forward a strict 5-minute limitation on both sides. That means there will be 7 more people who get to testify between now and 5 o'clock. So, Ms. Deal, if you would please proceed.
Certainly. Good afternoon, Chairman and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for having me testify today. My name is Janine Deal, and I started Michigan Safe Technology as an umbrella organization for safe technology advocates in Michigan. My goal is to make Michigan safe technology obsolete. I am in deep opposition to Senate Bill 637 and 894 because they will allow industry to install equipment necessary for their product and their profit in public rights-of-way, ignoring the evidence of harm their product is already causing. For example, you may see many familiar faces, and I believe, Chairman Glenn, that you had said once to one of the energy companies, these people are not going away, and that is correct. And there's a reason why we're here today, while you're seeing similar faces as people who've been opposed to analog choice, because we've either experienced 5G in some of these test markets and know what the effects are, or we know that non-ionizing microwave radio frequency radiation does have biological effects, and for some of us, it can be extremely debilitating. I have contacted countless people who have experienced symptoms of microwave sickness, also called electrosensitivity, after exposure to wireless radiation. I have spoken with parents whose children get daily nosebleeds, headaches, extreme fatigue, and in schools that are equipped with high-power wireless routers. I've talked to countless people who experienced symptoms after transmitting utility meters were installed. Only one person that I've spoken to so far developed electrosensitivity in a different way. She's a medical researcher, and she was exposed to an unusually high dose of non-ionizing microwave radio frequency radiation, wireless radiation, in a lab experiment. It was an accident, a lab accident, and she developed electrosensitivity because of it. Senate Bill 637 and 894 do not promote the safe use of technology in Michigan. These bills will allow small cell towers to be installed just about everywhere in our right-of-ways. The number one remedy that people with electrosensitivity have told me is avoidance. Number one is avoidance. If small cell towers are installed everywhere in our right-of-ways, people like me will not be able to avoid this radiation. Wireless technology is a product. It is not a necessity of life. I was in my 50s before I got my first cell phone, and actually I don't even use it anymore because I've become so sensitive to the wireless technology. But it is not a necessity of life. Many of us grew up, maybe not the younger ones, but many of us grew up with landline phones and 20, maybe not 20 people in the house, but 5 people in the house, and we all used one landline. So, you know. And just like tobacco and asbestos, this is not the first time that an industry has lied to us about the health effects of their product in order to preserve their profits. With 5G technology, people will die. Their lives are in your hands. Please be wise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deal. Representative Barrett.
Thank you for your testimony. I had a question about, I understand your opposition to the 5G, small cell expansion. But, I was thinking about it. I have a smartphone. It tries to find, surrounding wireless networks. If I'm sitting in my house, I might have 3 or 4 wireless networks of my neighbors that certainly cross over my property line to where my phone can detect them. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that radio frequency signal would cross property boundaries from one neighbor to the next. How would we, I guess, avoid that in a strict sense of property rights? We can't set up a barrier on your property that prevents your neighbor's Wi-Fi signal from coming across. Or if you're in an apartment, you could have multiple units that all have, wireless routers within them, for example.
Excellent question, and that is, I'm not the technical expert, although I do know that the routers are becoming more powerful and reaching further, so that's something that can be changed and mitigated. As far as, if you do any research as far as people who get electrosensitivity, when people are in apartments, it can be so much worse because, like what you said, they're getting Wi-Fi routers from every direction. There might be a bank of 20 smart meters, within feet of their bedroom, something like that. So yes, indeed, this is an issue. All I can say is that some of the experts have already testified that, 20 years ago we did not have this, and we didn't have the people who were developing electrosensitivity. I think we've seen in a way, a blossoming of electrosensitivity with transmitting utility meters. Some people, I believe it was Dr. Hero who said, basically some people become sick almost immediately. And then for others, it's a cumulative effect. And there is a genetic aspect too. People who, and somebody even mentioned, smoking cigarettes. Some people can smoke 2 packs a day and never get cancer, and others, can't hardly smoke and they die of lung cancer, or they don't even smoke and they die of lung cancer. With electrosensitivity, I think it's something similar. Some of us detox a lot quicker and more efficiently this radiation, and others don't. So so it is a very biological thing, and I mean it just as far as health goes, so. We were talking about detoxing, you might, carrot juice and beet juice might detox you wonderfully, but I need celery juice and greens or something, so we're all so different. We all react biologically a little different. That's why some people can smoke cigarettes and drink whiskey every night, and they live till they're 95.
Thank you, Janine. Representative Farrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
My question is what is your response to the first responders, like your firemen and police, that use this technology to go to people's homes and protect them 24/7?
Right. I totally understand that, and I'm, like I said, I'm not the techie. I grew up with no cell phones. I was between 50 and 55 when I got my first cell phone. And no first responders, had cell phones at that time, or maybe at that time they started getting them, but the United States has gone how many, few hundred years without cell phone technology. So I mean, I can understand, yes, being able to text and being able to have a cell phone, is an extreme convenience it is not a necessity for life. And when you're talking about a form of radiation that is proven to have biological effects and is now proven to have carcinogenic effects. This is a peer-reviewed study, you know, and it's not the first also. The NTP study is not the first, but it's proven to have carcinogenic effects.
Ms. Steele, let's give some other people a chance to testify, please.
Sure.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Farring, do you have any? The next person up we're going to have, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is Ted Bolema. If Ted's Bolema. Now, this is the last card we have from somebody who is in support of the legislation. As we go back and forth, if there's anybody who has testified earlier in favor who would like to offer some kind of rebuttal, we'll make that opportunity available. If not, we'll just continue through those who are opposed. Mr. Bolema, please proceed. We're going to time you at 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll get right to it. I'm a senior fellow with the Free State Foundation, a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and educational foundation located in Rockville, Maryland, although I'm based here in the Lansing area, live and work here. The Free State Foundation is a free market-oriented think tank focused heavily on communications law and internet law and policy. I'm an economist and an attorney and specializing in regulatory law and economics. I've taught at Central Michigan University and George Mason University Law School. I've also had positions in the federal government, and I'm on the Board of Scholars of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. I'm going to jump ahead to page 2 of my prepared testimony. I want to talk about 2 reports that both came out last month in April of this year on why 5G deployment will be vital to Michigan. The first one's by Recon Analytics that looks back at the economic benefits from 4G and finds that U.S. leadership in 4G accounted for nearly $100 billion in the increase in annual GDP by the year 2016. The second report is by Analytics Mason looking forward on 5G and finds that currently the U.S. is third in the world in 5G readiness behind China and South Korea, but just barely ahead of some other countries. That's important because the quicker 5G is deployed, the quicker the U.S. consumers will experience the economic benefits of 5G, and that applies at the state level too. The states that deploy faster will get a greater share of the economic benefits that are going to come from 5G. Now, although 4G brought significant economic benefits, they'll be even greater from 5G. Current estimates are that it will bring about $275 billion in investment, 3 million jobs, and $500 billion in additional economic activity over the next decade. Michigan accounts for about 3% of the U.S. GDP, so just applying 3% to that, we're talking about $15 billion in economic growth and 90,000 more jobs. Other states are looking at, at least 20 other states are looking at legislation that's similar to the bills you're considering. And Arizona in particular is one that I was following that passed a similar bill last year. The bills before you appear to be consistent. The details vary from state to state, but the common goal, which I think is important, is to provide for access to municipal properties, reasonable and predictable standardized costs, avoid long negotiations, and streamline the permitting process. States that don't follow those examples of the other states that are going forward are going to lose economic benefits by lagging behind in 5G. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolema. Mr. Representative Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Were you able to hear our friend Frank from Canada's testimony?
Just a few minutes ago?
Yeah. You're a litigator. Do you practice in trials ever?
I don't. No, I do more antitrust trials of
Okay.
that type, and it's been a while.
Yeah. I guess I'm just trying to parse through what he was talking about. Have you seen any of those studies that he's been talking about?
I have not. I'm not going to hold myself out as an expert on the medical implications of any of this. That just my experience from following legal matters generally is we'd hear a lot more about them if this was a rather serious liability area.
So we've been using this 5G technology for a little while now.
4G for a while.
Well, I know that like Meyer, every Meyer in the country, every Meyer has a 5G signal booster on its facility.
Okay, that would be very localized then.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. But have you seen any cases in America or the continent that deal with the health implications of these meter?
Well, I've seen some reports on it. Yes, there are measures. The first speaker of the afternoon session talked about that, so I've seen those types of studies before.
Yeah, I mean, have there been any judgments? Have there been any courts that have...
I'm not aware of them. It's not, I don't follow specifically that, but I'm not aware of them.
Okay. Well, thanks for testimony today. Appreciate it.
Mr. Boltman, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we'll have Lori Ebaugh, if she's still in the room. Ms. Ebaugh, please press the red button, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you. How's that? That's better. Okay, it was on before. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all members of the committee for having me today. I'm here to speak as a citizen and on behalf of the citizens of Michigan. So we've heard today both sides. Is 5G better and more and faster and more advanced than 4G, or is it an unproved, unnecessary risk to people's privacy and health and property? 5G and 4G are very, very different. You'd asked a question about the difference, and 5G hasn't been deployed widely yet. There are 11 beta cities in the United States where it's going to be deployed. Ann Arbor's the only one in Michigan. So we don't have a whole lot of history about 5G. Many people, everybody that I talk with, don't really understand what even G means. They don't understand what the difference between 3G and 4G was, and certainly not between 4G and 5G. It's still something that needs a lot of education. That's why we're doing this here today. The difference between the 3G and the 4G was in the amount of data that could be processed, and the infrastructure remained the same. These are the tall cell phone towers that we are familiar with. We know what the risks are, and we know that in Michigan, the people who don't want those cell phone towers can say we don't want those in our community on the rights of property rights, aesthetics, and whatnot. We are not allowed to use health reasons for protesting those towers coming into our community because of a law that bound us by the FCC, and we've heard about the FCC problems in our and their regulations and whatnot. So, but people don't fully understand the difference with the 5G. The 5G is still in the microwave technology or in the microwave bandwidth, but it's in the upper end and it's much denser. Mr. Clegg had mentioned that it's been used as part of a military operation to actually use crowd control because it affects human skin. It can make our nerves feeling like our bodies are on fire, and that's why it's been used. In my testimony, or on the bottom of my testimony sheet, I have a reference to Raytheon's introduction back in 2007 to what's called the active denial system. This is crowd control, and it uses the same kind of mini microwaves that 5G will use. So some of the studies that we've been talking about today have to do with all of cell phone technology and 4G. Those are the larger studies that we've been mentioning. But this short, compact part of the bandwidth, which is 5G, hasn't really been fully tested. And that is a huge problem. We don't know exactly how this is going to affect human health. We know what, in general, the 4G technology and microwave do, and it has been proven that they do break human DNA and cause cancers. But we don't even know what this particular kind of frequency is going to do, and that scares us, those of us who are electrosensitive and those of us who understand what G means. So the bottom line is this better, faster? And as the representative from Verizon said, it depends. You know, it depends who's going to benefit here. If you're in the industry, yes, this is going to be of a benefit. If you're a citizen, maybe not. If you're a municipality, probably not. No, some rights will be taken away. The public right-of-way will be compromised. So it comes down to who's going to benefit. And the benefit that has been mentioned, the strongest benefit for the 5G customers, is that it allows more people to stream videos from their phones. So on their phones only, streaming videos, up to 20 videos in seconds. I can't consume 20 videos per second. And for this, we're being asked to give up our rights and our municipal right-of-ways for streaming videos. We're going to lose our ability to say no to having the transmitters on our main streets and on our utility poles across from our homes. We won't be able to eject because object because our property values may go down, or because we suddenly can't sleep at night, our children develop nosebleeds, headaches, or worse, possibly cancers. Whereas the benefit to the telecommunications industry is that they will be able to capture and sell all of our private information to use our citizens' property for their unsightly infrastructure, and in the future, possibly track our private behavior through this Internet of Things, recording everything that we do, from our appliance usage, our personal habits, and tracking the exact location of our cars. So this is a privacy rights issue as well. The telecommunication industry is planning to make big profits on Michigan citizens' property privacy and stick us with the bill. They will not be held liable for injuries sustained when the infrastructure fails, gets hacked, or causes illness to us. SB 637 and SB 894 are extremely costly to Michigan citizens, and we're going to pay with our privacy, our health, and our property rights. We don't know enough about this kind of technology right now. Yes, some people say there are great benefits, others say there are great risks.
Ms. Eba, we appreciate your testimony today, and Representative Hauk has a question.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. I appreciate your testimony. You're the second person I heard today say that you cannot use the health factor when, let's say, a tower wants to come in, you can't use that.
That's right.
Do you know, like, when a smoke shop comes in, can you argue the health factor, whether to allow that into a community or not?
I don't know anything about that.
Do you know, like a McDonald's? I mean, obviously, if you eat too much of it, could you go to a planning commission and argue the health factor for McDonald's not to be into your neighborhood?
I don't know that, but I do know that with me walking into a smoke shop or into a McDonald's or not is my choice, and that McDonald's doesn't come out and force it in front of my house or on my main street.
I guess I was on a township, and I guess when I hear that, you have to look at I was on the planning commission, and you have to look at whether it's allowed by your planning code into an area.
Yes.
You know, whether you can allow it or not. I think that's what municipalities have to look at when they come in, whether it's zoned for that. Now, whether or not, if the federal government came in and said this was harmful for everybody's health, then I think that would be a whole different thing. Sometimes I think we have to be a little careful how we say that, because sometimes it sounds like communities are just letting these come in, you know, and they're just willy-nilly, and they don't, you know, so I think we have to watch. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Now, does anybody who is in favor of the legislation wish to take 5 minutes? If not, Sherry Trent? Yes. You're passing, okay. Cynthia Curtis? Cynthia Curtis? Didn't mean to catch you off guard there, Miss Curtis. I'm going to time you at 5 minutes. Press the red button, please, and we look forward to having your testimony.
Okay. I'm a citizen. I like to have my personal rights supported, respected. I guess the main thing that I dislike about this push is that it doesn't allow us to have any recourse. That doesn't seem fair at all. And you know, these things can be pushed into our right-of-way, as many people have said. If there are health benefits, they're not allowed under law. I mean, health effects, bad effects, not allowed to be presented, and I don't think that's right. I'm not even going to take 5 minutes, so if anybody has any questions, they can ask them, but I've sent emails to all of you. I've several of them with some of my issues, and I guess I do better with writing than in person, but are we done?
Ms. Curtis, thanks for your testimony. We appreciate you coming down from Sheboygan.
Yep.
Greg Groninger. Greg still in the room? Okay. Greg, I'm going to time you at 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity here. My name is Greg Groninger, and full disclosure, I'm not an attorney. My background and education is medical technology and chemical engineering. The constitutionality has been beaten to death, but it needed to be beaten to death. Basically, these two bills are constitutionally bankrupt. We also have statutes which are looking to be over or set aside to allow this technology to be moved in. And what I'm talking about is the eavesdropping statute, which is MCL 750-539D, which does not allow anyone to eavesdrop on things coming from your home, information coming out. This technology has the capability of picking up that and utilizing it. And we can all say, well, that's not the plan, but if it can be, it will be. So that eavesdropping statute is being totally overridden here. The other one is trespass. I personally, the Constitution has protections, and trespass is one of those things. The horse is already out of the barn on radio frequencies, RF frequencies coming in, but we can't double down on this by adding additional. And I do not want the radiation coming in to my private space and my property. And that statute, 750-552. And so I want you to really consider the constitutionality of it. You took an oath to support and defend that Constitution, and those constitutions are to protect our rights, and that's your responsibility. So when we start looking at overriding and ignoring the Constitution, ignoring already established statutes, that is not something that we look to you to be doing, and it's a disgrace. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Did you say Groninger?
However you want to say it, Gary.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your testimony, sir. Next, we'll ask Lola Killey, Ann Arbor City Administrator. Okay. Martha May Blosser, Holistic Therapy Practice. Mason? Ms. Blosser, welcome, and
thank you.
Look forward to your testimony.
I appreciate your time and the opportunity to address you. I have a practice of 16 years, a private practice as a holistic therapist, which means that I address all levels of my clients' presence, the physical, emotional, mental, and the energetic. I have a number of people who have come to me with conditions that they don't know the cause of, and I help them discover. I've recently become aware of the electrosensitivity illnesses through some of my clients who have had symptoms that weren't explained by anything else. And when their homes were metered to see what kind of radiation they were living within, and efforts were made to resist that input that they were receiving, they improved. Not immediately, not all the time, but things like difficulty sleeping, feeling dizzy, indigestion, headaches, noises in the ears, a whole litany of things are the kinds of effects that people can experience. And I feel that the research into the effects of 5G before it is enacted is really very important and responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blosser. Don't have any questions from the committee. Appreciate your testimony.
You're welcome.
Carol Garcia from Romeo. Still in the room? Nope, she left. Deanna Hilbert from Rochester Hills.
Can I give my time to Mike Watsa
Who is Mike Watsa?
from ProTech? Are you still here? Huh?
Now, was he before us once already today?
He didn't get to
With the
speak.
mayor, Your Honor.
He was with the mayor, but he didn't speak.
I did not have a chance to testify.
Well, sure, come on up. I'll time you at 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for deferring your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know there's an event going on up north, and I appreciate all of you being here so late into the afternoon. My name is Mike Watsa. I'm a partner with Kitch Drutchess. I practice telecommunications and energy law. I also taught telecommunications law from time to time at Michigan State University Law School. I represent ProTech. ProTech is a consortium of 75 communities across Michigan, at least a couple hundred more that listen to some of the things we talk about. Our focus is on right-of-way. The board members of the ProTech are Dearborn, Livonia, and Southfield. We've been around 22 years. MML is our fiscal agent. Very quickly, I just cap on what some of the mayor talked about already. This bill is unnecessary for several reasons. It's only been passed in a minority of states, AT&T states. It's an AT&T bill. So we don't have to do this. The Fed is acting. Congress has bills and resolutions on this issue. FCC is currently involved with the BDAC, the Broadband Deployment Committee. Then they're pushing their materials out. And so by this body acting and the legislature acting, we actually probably create a greater or additional level of bureaucracy in addition to what the Fed is already doing, which has historically had jurisdiction over wireless. The bill is 36 pages of very poorly constructed, difficult to interpret material. I, as counsel for numerous municipalities, I can tell you that it is not an easy read, and it will lead to more litigation, greater uncertainty than we already have, and not the solution that the industry might be looking for. I'll just tell you by way of example, on the grandfathering point that AT&T counsel made earlier, I was actually tasked at trying to figure out what that meant. And I can tell you that after some significant amount of time, it's not clear. Just by way of simple example, typically if you're going to grandfather existing agreements into a 36-page long set of rules, you would put the grandfathering clause at the end of the bill or the statute, because that makes it clear that if there's something that preceded the act, it survives the act. That's not the case here. The grandfathering clause, and the term grandfathering is not employed, is stuck in the middle. It makes it very unclear just exactly what is grandfathered. And I would just also add that one of the points of the grandfathering is that it's at the discretion of the industry, because it only works if their facility is up, running, and turned on. And so obviously that's within their purview, not the community. And we've made progress. It's been a couple years, well, 2014 when the FCC came out with their order on this issue and really got all this started. We were getting applications across the country for 120-foot mobility towers right on the right-of-way, within 15 inches of the right-of-way. Those have gone away. Why? Because we filed pleadings and so on at the FCC. We've pushed the industry back on that. That was a bad idea. 120-foot tower, 6 feet wide, right off the right-of-way with apparently no guarding. And all of our testimony is available both at the FCC and that I provided to the Senate. I forwarded that to the chair's office Friday when I received notice of this hearing. So you have all that material at your disposal, should you care to read it. Also, just as an example, California legislature passed a bill like this. The governor vetoed it. Not long after he vetoed it, the city of San Jose entered into an agreement with AT&T that provided significant benefits for all concerned. AT&T received the right to install 170 small cells with as many as 1,000 at a later date in a second phase, but they paid for it. $850,000 up front to help the permit system, another $1 million grant to help with the permit system, because moving all those applications costs money. And municipalities, as you know, are short on money these days. And then they were charged $1,500 per year per small cell site with a 3% annual escalator. That is market rate.
Mike, we appreciate your testimony. Representative LaFaves has a question?
Sure, fire away.
Yeah. Our friend from Canada that testified in here, did you listen to his ultimate conclusion that he came to?
I listened to his testimony.
So he said that these 5G cells, 5G things cause cancer. You heard that?
I'm familiar with that position.
As a lawyer, do you think any judge in the country would allow that testimony to be held on the record and read to a jury?
Well, I actually am not here to testify on the health issues. I'm not a doctor.
Well,
but I
mean,
have seen the NTP study, and it has an impressive list of PhDs and MDs on it. I think that.
But are they reputable? I mean, can you reproduce those study results?
Well,
reliable principles and methods.
I think if I think that would be an interesting test in the courts, and perhaps we'll have that opportunity.
Do you think? Do you think they're? Let me try to phrase this.
I'm not here testifying on the health effects. Just
well,
so
no, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking you is, as a lawyer who you said works in energy law,
yep.
Do you think that you could get through the 704? I believe not 704. Forget the federal rules of civil procedure on it, but reliable principles and methods and all of those to have that testimony left on the record. Do you think that that would have any chance of getting through a court?
Any chance of getting through a court? I think it has any chance, sure.
1 to 10.
Don't know. That's one of those things you have to find out when the rubber hits the road.
Mike, how should we interpret the fact that the Michigan Municipal League says they're neutral on this legislation? You're affiliated with them, is that correct?
ProTech was formed 22 years ago to deal with right-of-way issues because, frankly, MML, MTA can't do it all, and we were facing a lot of acrimony with telecom industry in particular, and so this is what we do. This is all we do. I think that MML and MTA reached a point where, hypothetically, I might have heard that they were told, look, either you accept what we're agreeing to do on this bill that started in October, or we're going to pass it as it was in October. And so have there been some improvements since the original draft, which was hideous? Yes, but nothing that gets us where we need to be in order for this to actually become law.
Appreciate your testimony. Appreciate the indulgence of the people who've joined us here today. And committee members, we will have another hearing on this issue sometime in September or later. I've given a commitment that we'll give at least 30 days notice on that. That won't be hard to do. Anything further? We got any absent members? Okay. No absent members? Okay. With no further business before the committee, the House Energy Policy Committee stands adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.